Greetings and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II, and I am the chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. Here we hold conversations with some of the world's leading thinkers in longevity, science, technology, philosophy, and politics. Like the philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment, we aim to connect every field of human endeavor and arrive at new insights to achieve longer lives, greater rationality, and the progress of our civilization. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. We are pleased to provide you today with this discussion on big data, artificial intelligence, and longevity, and the interrelationships among those fields. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II, and I am the chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. Today we have our distinguished panel of U.S. Transhumanist Party officers, our Director of Visual Art, Art Ramon Garcia, our Director of Applied Innovation, David Shoemaker, and our Legislative Director, Jason Geringer. And our special guest today is Didier Coeurnelle, a longtime member and ally of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. He is the Vice-President of AFT-Technoprog, the French Transhumanist Association. He is also co-chair of HEALS, the Healthy Life Extension Society, an association that promotes a much longer life in good health. The association organizes international conferences and publishes a monthly newsletter, The Death of Death. So welcome, Didier, and thank you for joining us today. Now, for those of you in the audience, I think we're going to want to record a version of this stream.
Recording in progress.
Just so that we have a video version that might lack some of the buffering that our current connection may be experiencing, but please keep us updated in the chat as to the quality of the connection. And in the meantime, I would like to invite Didier to provide his presentation on the subjects of big data, artificial intelligence, and longevity. And if we need to repeat any aspects of the presentation, then we can do that at the appropriate time.
Okay, thank you. This virtual enlightenment salons and the other one, I'm not always looking directly, but almost always looking after when I don't have time. So I will directly begin my presentation. I will need about, let's say, 15 to 20 minutes maximum. And then there will be the best part, your questions and remarks. So this is about big data and even open big data, AI and healthy longevity. How could we progress and how could we make things better in this domain, complicated domain? First, a few facts about human longevity, facts that most of you already know, but a reminder is always useful. So the first classical one is that the average life expectancy is rising. It's rising since about, in our countries, more than 1 century now. And it's rising, it's still rising at the global level, about 2 to 3 months a year. Well, this, at least in the pre-COVID times, the COVID times, we don't know yet, but probably it will rise again. We die of what? We die of the 3 big categories of diseases due to aging: cardiovascular diseases, cancers, and neurodegenerative diseases. The situation concerning the diminution of these diseases is going very positively concerning cardiovascular diseases, also quite positively concerning cancers, but less or even not at all concerning neurodegenerative diseases. We don't have any cure at the moment. But also, that's the elephant in the room. when we die of diseases, or when you die of old age, it can be also because we died of infectious diseases like the COVID-19, of course, like flu, like tuberculosis, or because we fall. If we fall, young people, when they are falling, they don't have almost any chance, any risk to die. Old people, in kind of 10% of the cases, when they broke something or even more, they die. Now, that's the facts about average lifespan, that the life expectancy that everybody, almost everybody in this room, even longevists, even transhumanists sometimes forget that facts about maximal lifespan. So actually, if you take a less positive way to see it, we only progressed about 20 years in more than 2,000 years. So the first person who ever reached the age of 100 years, certified, was Terentia. Terentia was the widow of Cicero, and she lived. She died at the age of 104 years, just the beginning of our era. So more than 2,000 years ago. And like you probably know, the oldest person ever was Jeanne Calment. Well, there are some controversies. She was 122 years when she died. And the oldest person in the world at the moment is only 118. The oldest man at the moment is only 112. And like I said already, there is no real progression for Alzheimer's disease. So this, when let's say people against life extension are saying, yeah, but life expectancy is not progressing, they are sadly right concerning the maximal life expectancy. And what we know about maximal lifespan is that is genetically determined. So I like this example. If you give $5 billion to the best scientist of the world, and you say, please keep this mice alive for at least 6 years, he will never manage it. And if you give, well, even $100 billion to the best scientist in the world to make years, they will also not manage it. So what we also know, that's genetically related animals can have very different lifespan. So very probably this means, and this is very positive, that you can change the lifespan, well, quite easily if you have gene therapies. What we do not know about maximal lifespan is why can we not prolong at the moment maximal lifespan when we can, while we can prolong average lifespan, if there are gene therapies working against aging for human beings. For flies, we have that, but not for human beings. If there are products able to prolong maximal lifespan, probably not for senolytics, for metformin, and for rapamycin. And if there are other therapies that we could develop, nanotechnology, microsurgery, regeneration, to make lifespan longer. So what's the goal of people, of let's say longevist people like Aubrey de Grey and many others? So they think that it's very probably possible to find a treatment against aging in within 15 to 30 years, but it will be complicated and expensive, and artificial intelligence could help us. We should use AI for this. And this is, of course, the main thing I will approach today. And what I wish I also want to, and that's also maybe for the discussion, no patent, or at least not for everything that is paid with public money, for some reasons also that I will explain maybe later. Now, let's speak about big data. Big data and health, of course. Where is the information? So the information about health is in scientific literature, of course, is of course also in your smartphone, and there is a lot of information taken by tech giants, by social networks, but also for the biggest part, the medical information is collected by administrations, by medical institutions for really the biggest part, for gigas of information, but it's collected there and it's almost not available for research. So just a few months ago, in Europe, you have at the moment a discussion concerning artificial intelligence, what should be allowed, what should be prohibited. And you know that European Union is very sometimes, well, not at all proactive, but they have in this discussion for artificial intelligence something very, very positive. So it's written in one document, you have the link there, that by 2025, the Commission wants to ensure that citizens from all the member states are able to share the health data with healthcare providers and authorities of their choice. So there is an official goal that theoretically people who want to share their health data with scientific authorities, for example, it should be possible. So I don't know, of course, yet if it will happen, but if it happens, it would be great. In Europe, I took only Europe for health big data. You have what's called the European Health Data. Consult all your health information, but practically it's not working so good. In France, you have something called Health Data Hub. There, in theory, it's very nice. So you have this virtual place where scientists can ask to access scientific data. And France has a lot of scientific data. The big problem is in 2 years, there were more than 500 scientists asking to have access to health data. And there were eight organizations who were, or projects who were allowed. So percent of the scientists asking to have access, it is refused. In Finland, you have an organization called FinData, and this one is working, seems to be working, I would say, almost as good as Estonia. And normally there you have a system of opting, that's called opting out. So if you don't want to share your data with scientists, you have to say it. If you don't say anything, you are supposed to share your health data. Well, I will come back to this. Of course, it's with respect to privacy. You have also many organizations working with health big data. So of course, Apple Watch, like for example, I have this clock who is supposed to keep all my data concerning health, but I cannot use it. Well, I can consult it, but I cannot share it. You have Garmin doing the same kind of things. You have about, at the moment, 400,000 health applications in the world. Well, most don't concern many people, but this is a crazy situation. You have so many apps, but also so few ways to share. You have something called the Healthcare Data Institute, an organization, Microsoft closing the data divide, an organization called Data Saves Lives, another called Citizens. All these organizations have, well, all the last 4 organizations have as an official goal, among other things, to share their health data to make science progress. But that's the goal, and the results are not very big. So what are the most I think the situation is actually kind of similar in the US. So of course you don't have in the US the GDPR, but you have similar rules, a little bit less strong, except in California. You have the problem, the growing problem of social acceptation. So people agree to share data on Facebook, they agree to share data on all social networks, but they don't want to share their health data because they are afraid and because it's kind of yeah, big idea of privacy, even when it is not useful. So somebody from the European Commission said, and for me, it should be that the goal or the ideal situation, that regulation must focus on the ethical use of data to ensure that health data is used only for health and research purposes, but that health data is really used for this. Once again, that's not the situation. The one aspect is about, and it's one legal, ethical, but also technical aspect. You have two ways to normally ensure privacy. You have something called anonymization, and you have something called pseudonymization. Anonymization, it means that the disappears. So this is good because it means that you can. This is good for privacy because it means that well, you cannot find a person, and so you don't care about if you are afraid that your health data will be used for something else than for science. But the problem is pseudonymization is better because if you want to find more information about the data, you need sometimes to go back to the original person. And to go back sometimes to the original person, you need that's a pseudo. In place of Didier Coeurnelle, it will be number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But okay, it will be this number for all things. So better for science, less good for privacy. Then the biggest technical problem is what some people call trash in, trash out. So when you have, and this is really something more specific for health data. In health data, when you have some not good, the whole results of the research after on big data is very often totally bad. So you need more veracity in the data, and one positive aspect in countries in continent like Europe is that you have various sources of information for various countries, but it is also a problem, and a big problem in the US and also in Europe is problems related to commercial software companies. So I don't know what's the situation in the US, but I think it's about the same at least as in Europe. So you have many different software companies for all aspects related to, let's say, the working of hospitals, the working of scientific research. And sometimes it has, it means that it's very difficult to have exchange between data. One example that I like, well, I like the example, I like to give the example because it's clear. So you had two places where people were cancers, and they were scanning documents, and in one hospital the color of the scans was a little bit different than in the other hospital, and in one hospital there were more cancers than in the other hospitals because they were well, it was for different hospitals. And the results is the artificial intelligence who was studying the data, after a while he was, well, it was considering that a difference of color was a sign of cancer. So you understand, when there is health data a little bit difference coming from one other company, the let's say the big data research will have biases, and biases that people will not notice. Okay, and another problem is negative results. So negative results, at the moment, there is no obligation to publish negative results. So it means, once again, that you have about things that are working, and the data that is not successful, you don't have it. So you have one big bias there also. So let's see in one example for COVID-19 and big data. It's incredible the number of things that we still don't know. So I see that I'm always speaking since more than 15 minutes, so I will not go into details here. but that's for me incredible that we have probably more health data about COVID-19 than about any diseases ever, and still there are so many things that I don't know, and especially we don't know about reinfection after vaccination, about effect of antiviral and antibodies, about effect of other drugs. Now, AI and big data. So first, analysis of scientific literature. So normally you have IBM Watson. Probably you know about IBM Watson. That was probably the best software ever to study, let's say to study, among other things, scientific literature, but it's not working so good for studying health literature. Why? I don't know really, but there's a consensus that it's not working. There is at the moment no real Google search for longevity, no software aspects, but as you know, they are very secretive. And sadly, at the moment, well, there are no publications that are publicly available about the use of artificial intelligence for longevity from Google Calico. And then there is Facebook, the Chan Zuckerberg initiative. It was 3, 4, 5 years ago that his wife announced that they wanted to defeat all diseases during the life of their daughter, but sadly they are not so much, or even almost not anymore, working on disease at the moment. They are more working on the, let's say, social aspects and so on. What I want to say also, that's contrary to what some people against longevity and against and for privacy say, we're asking to citizens what they think about research for using AI for health. They say massively yes. So here, this was an poll. Poll, do you say that? Enquete about that in my country, Belgium, and you see there that about innovation. So, do you think that it's a good thing to use innovation for medicine and for science? 94% of people say yes. To reduce human mistakes and to reduce accidents, also 89% of people say yes. And even when it is coming from a smartphone, so do you accept to use data on your smartphone to make progress possible? There's a less big majority, but still a majority in favor. So we need at least to require private and public actors to make collected data available to passengers. I like to give this example. If from my window here in my house, I'm looking to people, how they are working and so on, well, it's allowed. If I'm looking from my window to people to understand how they behave and if they are becoming old and to make statistics about this, normally it's prohibited. So crazy situation. And I think that's another thing, that data for health should be considered as a common good. A few words about, even if it is not directly in the scope, but very, very fast about the fact that all this data should not, of course, be used for clinical tests for longevity as fast as possible. So sometimes when, let's say, the collective, the most active people decide something, it can go very fast, like the first man on the moon, like the first planes and so on. And there are 110,000 people a day to save. You know that about 75% of the people dying in the world at the moment are dying from diseases related to old age, and it's even more in our countries. And reminder, there are not so many things who happened at the moment concerning clinical tests, even if no international classification of diseases. I'm already coming to the conclusion. So we need more equality and equity tomorrow for all people. And the way to have more equity, not only equality, is to progress with health data research, to make clinical tests, and then to make more health and more longevity possible for the people who want it. It's not going to be compulsory, of course. Not all longevitists are transhumanists, but almost all transhumanists are longevitists. Among other people, the people from Association Française Transhumanist Technoprog, of course from the USTP, and of course from Humanity Plus. I'm also member of the board of Humanity Plus. There will be a conference on September 9. So this is the goal of this conference, to contribute to create a system that is trusted by citizens, managed by a public institution or an NGO, where all health data can be used for scientific research and not for any other use. And the final goal, of course, is to make everybody happy, able to live a healthier life for longer. And if you need more information, so you're welcome to consult this organization, some other organization, and to subscribe to the newsletter, The Date of Death. Free newsletter for the first 2 centuries. After that, you have to pay. That's it for now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Didier, for your presentation. And I think it raises a lot of interesting questions regarding how artificial intelligence can be harnessed, how data can be collected for the purposes of enhancing the pursuit of healthy longevity, helping patients to overcome diseases, to live longer, to lead healthier lives. And you mentioned a lot of the obstacles as well, both in terms of the progress of life expectancy in our era. Although it has been progressing, it has not been progressing at the rate that we life extension advocates would like. And furthermore, there have been some disappointments in the application of artificial intelligence. Particularly, you mentioned IBM Watson. So in your opinion, what is it about medicine and the pursuit of longevity that might create additional difficulties for the application of AI? Because AI seems to be fairly robust and advanced when it comes to, for instance, shopping online, getting content recommendations on YouTube. And there are so many algorithms now that are part of our everyday lives, and many of them work in the background. We don't even notice their operation. Some of these algorithms are of the sort that can learn from data, from experience, from user input without being specifically pre-programmed to achieve a result. Why do you think in medicine those algorithms are a lot less advanced than they are in other fields?
Yeah, that's for me a central question. The short answer is I don't know. Sadly, and I would like to know. But okay, I gave already, I think, a few partial answers. One thing is that, no, okay, the big problem is that for health data, even if you have a little bit of mistake, it's corrupting whole data. And for in other domains, even if you have a little bit of noise, it's called, or a little bit of non-correct data, it's still working. But why is it that? Why is this situation so? I really don't know precisely. But I want to say what what are the problems at the moment is that you don't have so much big data really collected or really used, possible to use at the moment. So I said, well, let's take the people here. We probably have many medical files in many places, but they are not collected for scientific research. That's one. Second aspect is, we have, even when scientists are able to use some health data, it's only for one place and not for enough different places. Then also, what's that? You don't have even that everybody knows that, for example, clinical trials with double blind is the only good way to have good clinical results and to have something that we can use. Many medical experiments are still done without this double blind. So double blind, it means, for those who don't know, that the people who are following the treatment, they don't know if it is a treatment or if it is a placebo, and even the people who are giving the treatment, they don't know if it is a placebo or if it is a real treatment. It's only when analyzing that you have this. So these are a few of the reasons, but still, why is it so difficult, and why, for example, when you are doing a Google search, even if there are mistakes in your search, it will work almost perfectly. Strange. And you mentioned IBM Watson, like a deception concerning research for health. Yes, this is indeed the case. It was a deception, and sometimes, I was speaking with one guy from IBM Watson, and he told me, for example, we are not able to, no, the software is not able to make the difference between recent news and old news. I don't understand. It should be normally very easy to to make a kind of, if it is recent news, it's more important than if it is old news. So I don't know.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you for your insights into that question, Didier. And we have a question in the internal chat from Jason Geringer. I can shed a bit of light on this, and afterward, I'd be interested in your thoughts as well, Didier. So Jason asks, what about insurance companies? Do you think insurance companies will support longevity research, or will they think people will stop buying life insurance? So in my experience, I am not a life insurance actuary, by the way. I am a property and casualty insurance actuary, but I'm aware of how some of the actuarial organizations in the United States have approached the question of longevity, and they're very interested in it. They're interested in the implications of a dramatic increase in life expectancy. Different insurance products will be affected in different ways. Life insurers would actually stand to benefit from increased longevity, because if they sell a life insurance policy and you don't die, they don't pay out. Now, on the other hand, they may also, those very same companies, be selling other products like annuities. And some annuities are for a fixed duration of time. Other annuities are for an indeterminate duration of time. So you could get, for instance, a life annuity for as long as you yourself are alive, or you can get an annuity for yourself and your spouse, and it will keep paying as long as one of you is alive. So if a person outlives his or her statistical life expectancy, then that annuity is going to pay longer and cost the insurer more. So some insurers are going to be protected if they have hedged their books of business, and they have the excess payouts from the annuities beyond what was expected offset by the diminished payouts from the life insurance products. Of course, pension plans would be concerned about increases in life expectancy. However, it may well be that those increases in life expectancy also lead more people to work, more people to earn money in other ways, be healthy for longer, and not rely on pensions as much. So there's that side of the issue. Now, within the insurance industry, I don't see any set answers or positions. I've asked Aubrey de Grey to comment on this as well in our previous virtual Enlightenment Salon. And his impression is there's interest in the issue, but there's still too much conventional thinking about it. So a lot of the thinking is along the lines that I have described, but it doesn't foresee the kinds of radical transformations of the rest of the world that would come about parallel to a substantial increase in longevity that may overwhelm any financial risks for the insurance companies. Now, I will also say my perspective is centered on the United States, where I interact with the actuarial societies to the greatest extent. I read their publications. I know they've held conferences about the prospect of living to 100, for example. I also know some of them in the COVID era have been saying, some persons within the insurance industry, that perhaps we were a bit too optimistic about the increase in longevity because recently in the United States, life expectancies have declined, and not just because of COVID-19, but because of the so-called deaths of despair, people in middle age dying from causes like alcohol abuse or drug abuse or suicide or obesity, and that has decelerated the increase in life expectancy. I would expect during the next 2 years, statistically, life expectancy will be lower than it was in the middle of the last decade, unfortunately, though perhaps not for all segments of the population, but on the whole. So there may be a bit more of a cautious approach toward this prospect within the insurance industry, but I don't think they're going to be leading the charge in the longevity field or in the applications of artificial intelligence and big data to these questions. I think the longevity advocates are the ones who need to be leading the charge. Didier, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, globally, I agree with you. First, I like this joke that I heard that insurers are the only people who try to sell you something and who really want you to go better. But of course, like you said, it's not in all situations. Sometimes they can be happy when people die. But okay, so normally they should be interested in life extension, especially healthy life extension, because for insurance, especially in the US, that's of course the of expenses. That's all aspects related to health. It's less the situation. It's also the situation in Europe, but less than in less spectacular than in the US. Sometimes insurers are really trying to push for healthy life expectancy, healthy rise of life expectancy, but let's say in more classical aspects like eating better and so on. And for the rest, they are like most, let's say, classical actors in the political and the social field. They are not aware that big progress can come soon from this direction. That's probably the main problem. But still, it's a potential public that we could try to approach. I know some people who were trying that. Yeah.
Yes, and as I mentioned, Aubrey de Grey has been invited to speak to certain conferences hosted by actuarial societies. So I think it's a step in the right direction that the insurance industry is even thinking of this and applying some sort of conceptual framework to it, even if we think perhaps they need to conceive of a more transformational set of possibilities. And hopefully we can work toward that in the coming years to get more people within that industry to realize the possibilities that we perceive. Now, it's also interesting in our YouTube chat, Mike Lazine says that he doesn't have life insurance and has no plans of dying. He also considers himself to be risk averse, so his probability of death hopefully would be lower than that of the typical member of the population and the typical purchaser of life insurance. And I will say I myself do not own any life insurance policies. And for me, it is in part an ethical issue in that I would never want to bet in favor of my own death. Now, I think the insurance company is on the correct side of that bet. They don't want you to die because they don't want to pay out on that policy. So it is true, it's possible for insurance products to be designed with an aim to encourage healthy behaviors. I know, for instance, in many life insurance underwriting applications, they ask you questions like, do you engage in skydiving or other kinds of risky activities? And if you do, you get charged a higher premium. There are also more innovative emerging insurance products that are catered to people who are more athletic than typical. So people who engage in running or cycling or other kinds of endurance sports, and they can show the benefits of that through various health metrics. They might get lower premiums as a result, but this is a very new type of approach. Historically speaking, life insurers have used very few criteria compared to what a big data driven approach would be. So they might use your age, they might use your gender, they might use your smoking or non-smoking status, certain kinds of activities like skydiving. If you engage in those, you pay a higher premium. But oddly enough, for most of life insurance history until very recently, a lot of lifestyle habits, including habits of fitness and other kinds of health maintenance, were not really considered. So for someone like myself who does exercise to a much greater extent than the average member of the population, who doesn't have a lot of the health issues that many people have, it actually would not be advantageous to purchase a life insurance policy at the typical premiums that would be charged. So now Zipporah Naomi Pico says in the chat that life insurance could be used. Yes, that's a possible application for life insurance. I'll just say it's an application that I'm still considering whether and when to delve into. But now let's go to other members of the panel for their questions and comments on Didier's presentation. Art Ramon, what would you like to ask Didier?
In science fiction, they have a lot of depictions.
Art Ramon, I believe you need to unmute yourself.
Can't hear you, man.
Yeah, in science fiction, they have a lot of depictions of this super intelligence, this hive mind with a globe. Everyone's connected. But when you have an artificial intelligence that's also part of that mix, do you see anything like that in the future? Is anyone trying to work towards that, having this super intelligent hive mind, you know, both of connected humans and of the artificial intelligence which lives in the cloud?
Okay, I would say first that was not the subject of my speech here, but I will still answer to this question. Yeah, this is one of the goals of many transhumanists is to reach general artificial intelligence, and of course this could be first useful for longevity. But there are also many risks related to general artificial intelligence. And what maybe concerning longevity and general and artificial intelligence, one of the things that I want to say is if the goal that we if we have as a goal for this artificial general intelligence to work for healthy longevity, there are probably less risks related to the development of this artificial intelligence, because, you know, general artificial intelligence could be very dangerous. And one of the reasons is because there are mistakes. or because there are biases in what we are asking to the general intelligence, and they are doing things that we don't want. So if the goal is explicitly healthy life extension, I think that the risks are less important there. Then that's one aspect of the answer. Another aspect of the answer is, and that's more what people like Elon Musk are doing, is trying to, let's say, to have a connection between artificial intelligence and the human mind. That's another category. It could be useful for longevity, but there I want to come back to one of the things I was saying at the beginning, that at the moment, concerning the neurodegenerative diseases, we are not progressing. So one really very big problem of the progress concerning longevity is all problems related to kind of a cyborg body, but we still have our brain. Our brain is still subject to, is still potentially subject to Alzheimer's disease, to degenerative disease. So it's not enough.
Yes, indeed. And I agree with your observations, Didier. It's particularly tragic that in the case of neurodegenerative diseases, there hasn't been that much increase in efficacy of treatments or cures. So you mentioned Alzheimer's disease. Also, brain cancers are among the least curable of cancers even now. And ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, is a disease that still affects a minority of the population, but it continues to emerge in people, and it's not really known why it can emerge at a wide range of ages, even for relatively young people. And some people, like Stephen Hawking, can survive for decades with it, but he was quite an outlier. For a lot of people, it kills them in just a few years. So that's quite tragic, and it's tragic that our current level of technological and medical advancement has not been sufficient to combat these diseases. Now, on the subject of the, go ahead, Didier.
Yeah, if I may say, so, and sadly, well, on one side, let's say public institutions are trying to find ways to fight against Alzheimer's disease. So there is a lot of, there is probably more money for this than for other diseases related to aging, but we don't progress. And so there is in Europe a big project called Human Brain Project that was, is of course Alzheimer and neurodegenerative disease. There is a similar project in the US. I forgot the name. There is also a similar project in Japan, but yeah, no progress, not much progress. It's also kind of in general strange that we know so many things. We progress in so many domains, but like I was saying at the beginning, concerning the maximal lifespan, 20 years, less than 20 years progress in 2000 years.
Yes, and it's interesting to consider that perhaps there might be some sort of key insight with regard to those diseases that contemporary science is still missing. And historically, we've seen entire centuries even go by where some key insight in a scientific discipline was not reached. And when it was reached, ultimately it transformed the entire field. For instance, the heliocentric model of the solar system transformed astronomy. The germ theory of disease transformed healthcare, and the discovery of the structure of DNA transformed healthcare even further. And without those innovations, essentially, the treatment of certain diseases would have been stuck at the prior level. Or antibiotics, for instance, were responsible for a tremendous part of the increase in life expectancy during the middle of the 20th century. So I wonder if there's some insight about the brain, about how the brain could succumb to disease that had been overlooked because it's unconventional in some way. People were looking in the more expected places, but they weren't seeing this unconventional connection. And I wonder if, in some ways, crowdsourcing data or collecting large amounts of patient information and setting AI algorithms to discover at least certain correlations that might be worth looking into could be a way to arrive at that unusual insight that would revolutionize the field.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think it's one, of course, big data concerning the brain and big data concerning the brain getting old. Yeah, it would be absolutely important. And the situation is, yeah, we know many, like I think you said, we know, and there are not so many things that we know about aging brains. Yeah. This should be important, but there I'm coming back a little bit to let's say the most important part of what I was trying to tell today is, at the moment, big data, well, big data for brains, but also big data for many other domains. It's in the computers of the clinics, but it's not shared at all. And when it's a little bit shared, the problem is the software, the material to collect it is different from one place to another. So it's quite complicated. And once again, also, if I want to share this, I'm legally it's almost impossible. And about laws, and I will share my data anyway, but if you say that, the scientists will not be able to use it because they have to follow rules. So very strange. But if I can go in maybe in the other direction, for you in the US, normally you are supposed to be less, let's say, careful with privacy, but actually it's, I think it's almost, well, no, I'm sure it's almost as difficult to share health data in the US than it is in Europe.
yes, and I think part of that is due to a 1996 privacy law called HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, which I think has become misinterpreted. The original intent was to protect patient privacy, but it's become used by institutions as an excuse not to reveal data to anyone, even to make it difficult for patients to access their own data. So that's a most unfortunate situation where a law that I think had good intentions ultimately became misapplied. And I think one reason why it was misapplied in the United States is because the United States has a uniquely litigious culture. So if any institution does something that offends or upsets anyone who has enough resources to involve an attorney, and attorneys actively seek out these cases and they want to turn them into even class action lawsuits. So anyone who is not being ultra cautious and ultra reluctant to do anything unconventional stands a risk of getting sued. So often these institutions will just say, well, we'd prefer not to share this, whatever somebody's interpretation of privacy will be, even if it's a very extreme interpretation, we're going to adhere to it. And of course, there could be ulterior motives as well. If patients don't have more of their own data, they're less likely to second guess the recommendations that that health institution gives regarding their care.
Yeah, and because I know that in the US, the law, for example, obliges, let's say, clinical place to give medical information to the patients on computer files, electronic form. This doesn't exist in Belgium, but in the practically it's almost the same as in Belgium. it's very, very difficult to get your own data. Yeah, very strange situation.
Yes, sometimes I have heard of stories where the electronic access consists of somebody printing out the record and then scanning it in a non-searchable format and sending it to the patient. So it kind of defeats the purpose of the electronic transmission. They're trying to comply with the letter of the law, but not the spirit of the law. So there is that. We have some interesting comments in the chat. Angel Love says, on the subject of the Hivemind, quote, I believe we are already a Hivemind in the US. Our AI is everywhere on the World Wide Web, as well as in our hands and in our homes, and practically flowing throughout all of our systems. And I think it's an interesting view of it. Of course, data are still siloed. So we have access to the data that I think are more mundane, like social media information, for example, or the news, or concepts of general knowledge, general interest. You could learn how to do mathematics at various levels online. You could learn about history. You could learn about art, philosophy, economics, many disciplines. But data that are highly particular to a given task or to a given individual, they're still siloed. And part of that, of course, is due to privacy considerations, but another part is due to what we just discussed. Institutions generally don't communicate with one another as often as we would like. Even a patient in the United States, even though health records are ostensibly required to be maintained in electronic format, generally that patient, whenever he or she goes to a new medical provider, has to give them the information pertaining to his or her health condition anew. So even if the providers are supposed to communicate with one another, typically the patient has more information, better information, more up-to-date information. And there really is a culture in the US healthcare system of the patient being the responsible party for transmitting all of this information. It's a lot of work to seek healthcare in the United States. It's almost a second job if you have a serious health issue. So that is quite a concern. And Angel Love also says, we need to fund and focus on these medical and technological and longevity sectors. We need more political and private funds and focus to increase the momentum. As she says, currently regenerative medicine and life extension medical research has quite a bit of funding, but disease management still has way more funding. And we mentioned in prior segments of this presentation some initiatives that are underway ostensibly to fund research into longevity. So there's in silico medicine, there's Google Calico, there's the Chan Zuckerberg initiative. There are the more, let's say, historically grounded longevity organizations that have this rejuvenation biotechnology approach as their focus, say the SENS Research Foundation, Sierra Sciences is another example. And those more, let's say, historically long-standing longevity organizations, they seem to follow a different path from the Calicos, the Chan Zuckerberg initiative, in that they're a bit more explicit about their goals, and they are more focused on kind of the practical, the engineering approach in terms of repairing damage, whereas it seems Calico, Chan Zuckerberg initiative, we often don't know what they're doing, but when we do know what they're doing, they're publishing these more fundamental research papers. So Didier, what do you think explains the difference between these approaches, where it seems the most ambitious longevity-oriented approaches are with organizations like SENS and Sierra Sciences, but they don't receive as much funding as the organizations that the more famous tech entrepreneurs are spearheading?
Yeah, big question. The biggest organization really fighting aging since many years is, of course, Sense, and managed by Aubrey de Grey's. It's also many years. Now they have a few, well, they have more and more people and organizations giving some money, but far from enough. And why? Why? Because of people are, let's say, afraid. Well, big organizations are afraid of giving money or giving support to kind of controversial figures, and because when somebody is speaking about fighting diseases, he will be great. When somebody is speaking about fighting aging, he will be considered like crazy. And of course, we know that this is not correct. And why even further? Probably because of what's called the terror management theory of the mortality salient. So speaking about the fact that we are going to die of old age is something frightening, and you have the choice between trying to defeat aging, and this is complicated, or trying to forget about it, and this is easier, even if easier, but of course not less useful. That's the first thing that I want to say. I want to say that Google Calico, actually, officially, their goal is to tackle but like you said, they are doing well. Actually, nobody knows precisely. Well, nobody. Google Calico knows it, but outside of Google Calico, almost nobody knows what they are really doing. And yeah, what are doing these more than 10 computer scientists? But for example, I don't know exactly. Maybe they will come someday with a big articles with things very important. Then what I also want to say, until just a few days ago, just a few months ago, I was also always saying the biggest problem at the moment, well, no, one big problem at the moment is that there is no public institution in the world who has as an explicit goal to fight against diseases related to old age. But this is maybe changing. Just a few days ago, there was a document. I will try to put in the chat of YouTube the link. There was a document from from some official institution in the UK, where they really say that they want to fight against the biggest cause of disease, and that is aging, implicitly, but very clearly. And in the US, there was this nice declaration of Joe Biden a few months ago about it should be great. We have the DARPA for defense. It should be great to have a kind of DARPA also for health. And just a few days ago, I saw that there is a name for this. This is DARP Health, DARP H. So we will see. So this is in these two places, things seems to progress fast. Sorry.
Yes, and hopefully we will see the fruits of these larger institutional efforts. They have been a bit underwhelming thus far, but maybe you're right, Didier. Maybe they are working behind the scenes to publish some groundbreaking research papers, and we might see those in a few years. The more the better, from whatever source, I would say, can accelerate progress in this field. Now we have some more questions. Daniel Twet asks, is there a standardized protocol for becoming a living open source health information longevity research donor, or will this take legislative action to accomplish? And one suggestion he has is, could the patients of longevity-friendly doctors legally consent for all their medical information to be available for longevity researchers? It's an interesting idea. What do you think about this?
So that's a great question. Sadly, at the moment, the answer is globally, I think, no. Because of all the, well, it could be possible to decide to share your health data, but after that, you could not share it with scientists because scientists have to follow many rules, and it will be almost impossible. So that's why I'm here actually, and that's why I'm trying to push organization to change these rules. But like I said, I was showing in one of my slides, there is one official goal of the European Commission that by 2025, the citizens of the European Union should be able to share their health data with the health authorities and also with the people they want. But this is only at the moment one sentence in one document of the European Union. It is also a sentence, or a similar, you can find a similar sentence on many places, but practically no. And this is this is really a big problem. I'm personally, I don't know, maybe other people also, but personally, if I could, I would immediately decide that my how do you call it, the Google Watch? No, it's a map, Apple Watch, sorry, that the data from the Apple Watch, the data from my smartphone, my health data, because I had a heart infarct 2 years ago, that would be shared with the scientists who fight longevity, but it's not possible. Or with all scientists, by the way, all health scientists. It's not possible. And the evolution in Europe, and especially in my country, Belgium, is kind of worrying because people are really afraid to share their health data, especially with public institutions. More afraid, they are more afraid to share. Well, sometimes they are more afraid to share their health data than they are afraid with their doctors, or that they are afraid to share their health data with Facebook. So strange.
Yes,
and coming back to Facebook, just to say, you were speaking about Zuckerberg initiative. So sadly, that was the goal. The goal announced 2 or 3 years ago was very nice, but now they are not working a lot on diseases, or almost nothing. I was just taking a look at the website when I was preparing this, not much. But what is quite promising is Vitalik Buterin from, so not Bitcoin, but the other one, I forgot the name.
Ethereum,
sorry. So this guy is really announcing that he will be involved in longevity, and he has some money.
Yes, and Vitalik Buterin recently made a large donation to the SENS Research Foundation. I think if we are to have hope that wealthy investors are going to fund longevity research, we will most likely have more success with more recent wealthy investors, people who acquired their wealth from cryptocurrencies and other emerging blockchain-based business models. It seems that there is a synergy between that field and the pursuit of longevity, and we actually had the occasion to briefly discuss that in our previous virtual Enlightenment Salon with Aubrey de Grey as well. But what you mentioned in terms of certain institutional tendencies is also unfortunate. If the European Union has somewhere in a statement a desire to implement something by 2025, that's 4 years from now, knowing the speed at which some of the EU agencies work, I think it would be difficult to imagine going from words on a page to full implementation within 4 years. They're probably going to need to set up a lot of committees, consultations, studies, and in the meantime, of course, the ideas will not be implemented, or they might be transformed in some less than fully desirable way.
I'm afraid so. Well, I hope you're wrong. I think you're right. But okay, maybe if there is impact of this declaration in let's say big media, maybe you can have a snowball effect, and well, it would be enough that it's working in a few countries. Huh? Okay.
Yes,
and
indeed.
once again, that's why one of the reasons I'm organizing this conference on September 9. And if you have ideas about how to push for this, please don't hesitate to tell me or to propose things.
Yes, so we now have a super chat from Alan Crowley, who asks, how can big data be used to facilitate public health measures for developing healthier cities? What do you think about that?
For healthier cities, well, let's say the biggest problem, well, there are the two big problems at the moment in big cities are, of course, global warming, but not only in big cities, and air pollution. So air pollution, well, and in the two cases, that's already thanks to health big data that we know about these problems. Otherwise, we would probably we would probably not know about global warming, and we would almost certainly not know about I forgot the name in English. So the small particles that are going in our lungs. So these are the two. So if you have good statistics concerning the evolution of temperature, good statistics concerning the evolution of pollution, it's quite easier to fight against it. And if you have good statistics about how many people die or are sick in how many in various cities, and that you can follow with the aspects concerning or other data, it's very, very useful. It's working a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. So Alan Crowley also remarks that some of the significant advancements in longevity in the United States from the last century were not so much due to medicine, but rather due to public sanitation, clean drinking water, mechanically enhanced workforce leading to greater workplace safety, and similar kinds of advances. Now, you've studied the statistics. What would you say is roughly the proportion of impacts from medical progress versus the more general improvements in sanitation and the day-to-day environment that people face?
Yeah, that's very difficult to know, but let's say, okay, and all rules of related to good health are also that's also because we have medical progress on the other side. So, but this what can I say about this? I never read statistics about which part. Yeah, I cannot tell. I would say globally, but very, very globally, that 2/3 of the ways of life expectancy is due more to the society working better, working healthier, and so on, and 1/3 is due to really medical progress. Yeah.
Yes, and I would say the two are interrelated. Jason Geringer in the chat points out that, for instance, within the city of London in the 19th century, they figured out that cholera was coming from the water supply, and by creating a cleaner water supply, they also took care of the cholera epidemic. And similar insights in our time could be derived through big data. Again, what if we're missing something, some factor that's contributing to the incidence of a certain disease in an area, but it's not intuitive, at least from the standpoint of our current tools and what we focus on, but through artificial intelligence, analyzing large data sets, we might be able to get some hints as to what that phenomenon would be. Now, also, I want to acknowledge...
Just to say, yeah, cholera is a very good example of that was really discovered thanks to big data from the time, and people didn't even know what it was cholera. So they really, the scientists saw statistics. They saw that wells were, let's say, infected. They didn't know about viral questions, but they could solve it. That was, and they could solve it through statistics, because they were seeing more cases there, less cases there. It should be the water.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. And I also wanted to acknowledge another super chat from Angel Love, who says, keep it up. Well, thank you very much. And thank you for your comments and questions earlier today. Now let's go to David Shoemaker. David, do you have any questions and comments for Didier?
Yes, hi, thank you very much. I was just curious, we've talked on a general scale, a societal scale, a historical scale. Perhaps we could take it personally. And I was wondering what your particular personal approach is towards longevity with the information and the background that you have. How do you apply this?
Do you mean what I'm doing?
Yes.
Sorry, do you mean what I'm doing for myself?
Yes, yes. What are you doing for yourself? How are you applying this information?
I mean, at the moment, I don't think that you can really do something to live much longer, except that you can do the classical things. So not to eat too much, not to smoke, not to have a life with too much stress. But for the rest, there is not so much that you can do at the moment to live really longer lives. Probably metformin and metformin is probably helping you, but for the rest, there is not much. So except pushing for more, I would say, like Aubrey de Grey is always answering this question, give me money. So I will not say give me money. I would say give money to Aubrey de Grey, or push for more science for these questions.
Thank you very much. We've come to the same conclusions.
Okay. Yeah. Sadly.
Yes, and it's interesting too. We live, I think, on the cusp between the era when really there wasn't much an individual could do other than live a conventionally healthy lifestyle, and now certain medicines are entering clinical trials like senolytics, and we still don't know from the experimental data what the net effects are, but maybe in a few years more systematic data will emerge.
Yeah,
and we'll see.
I'm not so well for senolytics. I'm not so optimistic. Maybe it will be a few years more, but I'm afraid. And once again, coming back to also one of the first things I was saying today, don't forget maximal life expectancy, still no progress. Let's say my first hope for me is gene therapy. Gene therapy with the CRISPR techniques, it's going faster and faster. But but still, there was a quite promising experiment with mice and gene therapy just very recently. It's a little bit, it's from Liz Parrish, so sometimes there are controversies. I have to take a more look, but it seems very promising. But okay, using that for human beings is not for tomorrow, of course, and that's why we have to have more money, but also to have more health data and also to accelerate clinical trials.
Yes. Now, it's interesting with regard to maximum lifespan. We had Jean Calment, who was quite an outlier at 122 years. Among the supercentenarians whose lifespans were verified, nobody else lived past 120 years. Right now, we have Kane Tanaka, who is the oldest person at 118 years and 190 days. But it's interesting, she's the third oldest person who has been verified ever. Do you think there might be just the slight upward creep in what I would call the average maximum lifespan at any given time? Because I recall in the last decade, the oldest people were dying at like 116, 117. And now Kane Tanaka, she's holding out, which is good. Now, what do you think it would take to surpass Jean Calment's record? What can be done this decade, hopefully, to have someone live to 123?
Well, this decade, I would say already, let's say that there is something sure. Nobody will go ahead of Jean Calment before at least 4 years, because that's mathematically okay. So from 1997 to 2025 for sure, it's a very long time, and I think that you really need some new technology in one domain. It could be gene therapy, it could be nanotechnology, it could be some product that is really very effective, but without that, and once again, for me, it's kind of also a mystery. So there are more centenarians than ever before. There are less people dying when they are 60, 70, 80, 19, but not 110. Kind of a, Why it's the situation is we can cure many things, but we cannot progress for aging, and we need some really new technology. I'm afraid.
So in the course of my research, I read about senile systemic amyloidosis, which is a condition where amyloid plaques form not just in the brain, but in other organs in the body. And this is a condition that tends to affect the supercentenarians who survive everything else. They avoid heart disease, cancer, diabetes, but they die of this. Do you think there are any promising approaches in the near future to cure or at least treat senile systemic amyloidosis? And do you think if those are applied to the supercentenarians, that could give them a few additional years of longevity at least?
Once again, sadly, I'm not a specialist of this specific domain, but I know that some people like Victor Björk, who was here not long ago, knows more about that. And the last times I heard about this, I didn't heard about one promising thing. And amyloid plates in the brain, we still, that's coming back to neurodegenerative diseases, we still are not able to cure it. And another problem, it seems that when you can, let's say, in the brain diminish the amyloid plates, it's too late, let's say. So very SAT.
Yes, indeed. So in our YouTube chat, Anna Arena asks, would it be better to redo the entire medical system as an alternative system than to try to work through the system we have now with all of its issues, access problems, bias, etc.? So she suggests instead of fixing the current institutions to make an alternative parallel set of institutions, what do you think of that approach?
Well, I think it could be useful to try to have, let's say, that in one country, you know, but you cannot, you could also imagine that you have one group trying that. That was one of the ideas. You know, scientists, they don't, scientists in the past, they were experimenting on themselves. And there was less, on one side, less ethical problems. So this could be, yeah, you could imagine that you have a community who is, yeah, starting from scratch, a community of well-informed people. But for this, you need a strong movement, and it will not be easy. So I would say, yeah, it would be great, but I would not do that only. I would also push in the direction of public institutions, because they have a lot of money, they have a lot of experiment, and sometimes, well, and people who are, let's say, deciding in the world today, they are also dying of old age, like you and me.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. And one would think these decision makers, especially if they have some amount of influence or power or wealth, would want to stay around for longer to enjoy those aspects that they have. But Bill Falloon of the Life Extension Foundation, every time he gives a presentation, he has a few slides about billionaires who died recently or other prominent figures who could have provided more support for life extension, but for whatever reason didn't consider it to be worth their time and money. Now,
for
Jason,
me, that's, if I may, something I like to say is the richest person in the world has a shorter life expectancy now that the poorest child just born in the poorest country in the world. So let's say Bill Gates, he's 62, 60, I don't know, 65, okay, but even 60. Statistically, he will not live longer than, well, 50 years. And life expectancy in the poorest countries in the world is about 50 years. Yeah, that's
yes,
that's
indeed.
the situation. Yeah.
And as I've said for years, life is the greatest wealth. So those of us who are alive right now, we are wealthier than the historical kings and magnates who are no longer living. We are wealthier than John D. Rockefeller or Steve Jobs, for instance. And preserving that wealth, I would say, is the greatest priority. Now, I'm curious what you think of this idea from Jason Geringer, who writes, it seems there's a need for an artificial intelligence to curate a group's data, like a group of patients, so that the individual patients may profit from the data while also creating a product that advertisers will want to buy. And he says it seems to him there is a need for a product that will gather information about current longevity research and also gather and curate data from groups of people. He says Google and Facebook are not going to want to give up their data, but if we curate the personal data in a way that is better, then maybe these kinds of entities, the Googles and the Facebooks, will want to buy the data from individuals, and instead of just harvesting people's data, they'll pay people for the data. What do you think? Is that a realistic prospect of changing the paradigm so that instead of them gathering the data, they pay us for our information.
Yeah. First, I want to go back to the question that you just asked before, to just say, you know, I was here also to listen to good ideas, and I like this idea, but completed by self-test. Coming back to that, I just want to say it could be interesting, you know, in one way to think. Okay, now coming to this question, I'm not so enthusiastic because people are, at least I don't know enough about the situation in the US to really, I would speak only about Europe here at the moment. People are afraid that big tech companies are using the health data against them. So to try to pay for this data could be making people even more afraid to share the health data than the other way around. But I know that this is a big discussion. In the political world, there are two ways to think. One way is you cannot sell the data, let's say, and another way is to say, okay, it is the data of people, it's worth money, so you can sell it, but you have to make explicit contracts. That's for health. I think it's a bad idea, also because ultimately, if you work this way, it means that the health industry, after that, they will have to sell their drugs even more expensive. So I prefer the idea that health data is a common good. And we were not speaking about DNA data. DNA data is, of course, one important aspect in health data. And DNA data, for me, should certainly be a common good.
Yes, indeed. So I am inclined to agree that there are some dangers with a practice where the costs of obtaining data become so expensive that they get built into the prices of drugs or medical treatments. And really, I think the goal is to have flexible access to information for doctors, for researchers who need that information. But you mentioned the privacy hurdles, and you mentioned the reluctance of people to share their information with healthcare institutions. And of course, a key portion of your plan is to have the data be anonymous and pseudonymous. So what do you think are some effective ways of not only achieving that, but convincing people in the general population that their information will indeed be anonymous, especially in cases where, let's say, someone has an unusual health condition and there aren't that many people with that health condition, and you combine the data with information about the person's age or gender or similar attributes, and you might have enough specificity that even if you don't disclose the person's name, anyone who knows anything about just the set of patients with that disease will know who that person is.
Well, I think the answer is not in making it not in making more, let's say, technical aspects, but more in making it very unuseful to sell it. So in making rules that say very explicitly this is totally prohibited. And in one technical aspect, it's in making it very dangerous for the people to access the data. You know, if people, well, actually, there is sensitive data about all of us already on computer, on files, of course, by in hospitals, by your medical doctor, and you are not afraid about this because, or you are not so much afraid about this because you know that they are not going to access, or that the chance that they are going to access it is small. If it is, let's say, dangerous, legally dangerous for people for scientists to sell the data, that's a guarantee. And this coming back to the question before, that's one of the reasons I think it's better not to make it possible to sell this data. Yeah, that's in short. And coming back also to what I was saying, when you ask people, at least in Belgium, but also I saw similar, how do you say that in English? Similar, when you ask people and you tell how many people are, okay, similar enquete about this. When you ask people, do you want to share with scientists, do you want to share data with health? So it's only to guarantee that that nobody is going to use it for another goal.
Yes, thank you, Didier. And we are now coming to a point in our virtual salon where I would like to go around the panel and see if the panelists have a final question or comment for you, and then we can conclude with your closing remarks, because I understand it's quite late in Belgium right now. So our first question will come from me, and it stems from your comments on historically self-experimentation among researchers being one of the practices that drove progress forward. And along these lines, I could think of a fairly recent example with Liz Parrish, who also happened to be our 2020 US Transhumanist Party vice presidential candidate, who performed now a famous experiment on her own self. She received a combination gene therapy, and at least if one looks at her, she's now 50 years old. She doesn't look like a 50-year-old woman. She looks much younger. And anecdotally, this isn't scientific evidence, but I had seen her first in 2016. And in more recent years, when I've seen her, at least to me, it appears she looks younger. So what do you think of the implications of her self-experimentation? And do you think this is a kind of breakthrough in longevity or age reversal that we might come to recognize the implications of to a greater extent in the coming years?
Yeah, I think the experiment that Liz Parrish did, the first, that was courageous. Then it's quite interesting. Well, of course, one person is really not enough to, it's only empirical, like you said, or it's anecdotal. There is also one experiment on mice recently. I don't know if it is published, but largely announced by BioViva, and it's also very promising. And like I said, I like also this idea of self-experimentation because because you have less ethical questions. And it was also in the George Church team concerning COVID, there were also self-experiments there, and this is also positive. So it's one of the things that we could promote with, of course, only well-informed people. It's one of the promising fields, not the only one, but one of the promising fields.
Yes, thank you, Didier. And now let us go to Jason Geringer. Jason, any final question or comment that you have?
Yeah, it seems to me that part of the root problems why people don't want to share their data would be, if they don't want to get spammed, by advertising, or they don't want the insurance companies to raise their rates. And I'm wondering, besides legislature and making laws against it, do you think there's anything we can do that will keep the insurance companies from raising someone's rates? you know, like maybe if we curated the data as a whole group, and so they were able to get the data from the whole group, but not an individual per se, you know, and then they wouldn't, I don't know, I'm just wondering how we can eliminate some of the reason why people won't want to share their data in the first place.
Yeah. Once again, here the situation is different in Europe, and especially in Belgium and in the US. But in Europe, it's now already almost okay. Even if the insurance company will have your data, they cannot do something with that. So it's legally impossible. And also, if somebody is accessing the data, there will be some indication that they were accessing the data. So they could be really in trouble. So, okay, but in the US, you have more possibilities to sell data and to also, I think, more possibilities to oblige the citizens to share their health data. So, but okay, aside of, let's say, legal evolutions, yeah, you can also have groups of longevists, transhumanists, longevists who are more active and who create a group, and they are going together. But that's coming back to the self-experiment idea.
Yes, so in the United States, there is actually a law at the federal level that is relevant to this, and I posted a link to the Wikipedia page about it in the YouTube chat. It is the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act of 2008. And this act prohibits the use of genetic information in health insurance and employment. It prohibits group health insurance plans and health insurers from denying coverage to a healthy individual or charging that person higher premiums based solely on a genetic predisposition to developing a disease in the future, and it bars employers from using individuals' genetic information when making hiring, firing, job placement, or promotion decisions. And I think this is an example of a good law. I'm in support of that because any sort of genetic discrimination, especially in this era when our knowledge of what the human genome codes for is still fairly rudimentary, would be based on really tenuous assumptions. There would be a lot of presuppositions about, oh, if a person has this particular genotype, then they're going to be more likely to develop a particular condition in the future. Well, maybe, but maybe not. And I think people should be given the benefit of the doubt. Moreover, most people, if you ask them, well, do you want your genetic information to be used for those purposes? They will say no. So people should have this control over their data. They should be able to specify, I want it to be used for this purpose, but not for this other purpose. And that's an example of a kind of protection that I think could be extended to other fields. There could be a principle that if you share your data, you have control over which third parties have access to the data and for what uses.
And if I may answer your question again, Jason. So what we can do is better inform about the fact that there are already protections for citizens like this Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. And this is, of course, particularly interesting in the context of gene therapies. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. So now let us go to Art Ramon Garcia. Art Ramon, any final questions or comments?
Yeah, as far as self-experimentation, where are Europeans going to do this? What country do they go to? I think here in the States, I think people go to Mexico. In Europe?
So your question is, in which countries is it easy to self-experiment?
Well, I mean, Europeans specifically. Where are Europeans going to self-experiment?
Well, at the moment, Europeans, when they are self-experimenting, it's not for science, it's for their own health. And then they are going probably in the same countries as the American citizens, like I think Mexico or other places. Yeah, but there is no people self-experimenting for science at the moment. Or
Okay.
Yes,
Thank
I
you for
think,
coming.
yes, medical tourism, of course,
yeah.
exists throughout the world. I'm curious, are there any European countries where residents of other countries go to get certain healthcare, like Switzerland, for instance, which is outside of the European Union?
Yeah. So, yes, you have that, but not on a big scale. One of the reasons is that social security in many, let's say in the richest, certainly in the richest European countries is working pretty good. So, and healthcare is working pretty good. So if you are going in another country, well, your first risk is that the health is not so good, healthcare is not so good, and certainly far more expensive. But you have rules also in certain cases. You can go if healthcare is not available in your country, but in another country, in some cases it's allowed, but it's quite specific.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you, Didier, and thank you to Art Ramon for his question. And now let us go to David Shoemaker.
Yeah, so for our final question today, I'm thinking about 2030. 2030 shows up in a lot of documentation from various different authors. I'm curious if there's a particular milestone or breakthrough or something that you really look forward to that you would really, really be delighted to see by 2030.
Yes, the answer is short and clear. Gene therapies for human beings working for longevity. That's the CRISPR-Cas9 and other therapies related to genes are progressing fast. Our knowledge about DNA is progressing fast also. Gene therapies for humans are progressing fast. Gene therapies for longevity for animals progress. Where we don't progress at the moment is gene therapies for humans for living longer. Well, maybe the exception of Liz Parrish, but okay, to be checked. Yeah, so by 2030, that's what I'm hoping. Of course, the future will tell us.
Yes, exactly right. So thank you very much for being here today. Very much enjoyed this.
Thanks.
Yes, and thank you, David, for that question. And now we come to the point in our virtual Enlightenment Salon where we will let our guest have the last word. So Didier, what would you like to add to the conversation that we've had today? How would you like to bring it to a close?
Yeah, first, thank you for the ideas. Well, I was hoping this, and I heard about 2 or 3 things that I will try to develop, especially the ideas concerning the self-test, one community, concerning really the central point today, big data, artificial intelligence, and how to progress. I still think that the most important aspect is to promote better use of health data, and to have better use of health data, we need to consider health data as a common good, and we also need better laws, better rules to make it possible to share data. And there we are living in very, very strange situation where we share health data for many things, but not enough for health. And we saw during this COVID pandemic, COVID events, that we really that big data is really useful, but that big data really needs to be more curated, more open, and that there is much work there to do. So we are progressing. We are going in the good direction, not fast enough, and we could go much faster if we were able to share more in an open way. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Thank you, Didier, for joining us today, for highlighting the possibilities in the use of big data and artificial intelligence for improvements in longevity, for improvements in our system of medical care. Let us hope that these improvements materialize. Thank you to our audience for joining us during this virtual Enlightenment Salon. I'm glad that ultimately we were able to get the stream to progress smoothly, and I believe those of you who experienced buffering earlier can go back to the recording of the stream, which will be available at the same link, and hear a smooth playback of Didier's presentation. So I do believe we were able to capture everything today, and we appreciate our engaged audience. We had some great questions and comments throughout this presentation, and this is the kind of venue we seek to cultivate, where we discuss these kinds of ideas that we could apply for the improvement of humankind's future. Thank you very much to everyone who joined us today, and I hope that you live long and prosper.